I want to thank Will Baggus, Andrea Geiza, Samantha Annett, Kyle Gummert, and Brian Steed, latest GoFundMe donors. Thank you guys very much. I have a thing going right now where if you send $20, you get a signed copy of my book, Wasting Talent. If you send $40, you get a limited edition blotter acid art piece. There's not real acid on it. I won't do it. But you know what I was going to do. There's not real acid on it for all you narcs. But, you know, I live off the donations. Next year, I got the movies coming out. I'm going to be in a different financial situation. But right now, I'm very fortunate that people are looking out for me. And instead of just taking, I think everything in life should be a give and take. I want to give the signed memorabilia so you guys get something for the donations. So that's the deal. 20 for the book, 40 for the blotter, 60 for both. If you're international, please add $20 because that's how much the shipping costs me. Let's get into the story. This is my 5 years in federal prison, part 23. And where we had left off last time, I had just gotten kicked out of the drug program, and I was on a really bad downward trajectory. You know, I was on a downward spiral. I just didn't give a fuck anymore. You took my year. I hardly had any good time left. I was getting in fights. I was getting caught making wine. And they were sending me on internal diesel therapy is what they were calling it. Sending me to different units for a week, and then I'd get settled, and then they'd ship me to another unit just to piss me off, just to fuck with my life. So eventually they had sent me down to Woodhouse. And I'd explained in the last video, Oxford, the way that it's set up is all the units have communal bathrooms, so the cells don't lock at night. This particular unit, it was called Woodhouse. All the units at Oxford were named after counties in Wisconsin. And Woodhouse was the only unit that didn't have communal bathrooms, and the cells actually locked at night. And the way that it was explained to everybody was that it was kind of like a problem inmate place, like people that couldn't really fit in other units, you know, like troublemakers. But the thing is none of these guys were troublemakers. It was just creepy child molester looking people. It was like the Chome Dome is what I would tell my friends on the yard. And then they'd all make fun of me and be like, you know, just be making fun of me for hanging out with the people in my unit. Even though I didn't outside of it, but when I went to the yard, they'd be like, I don't know how you stay there. I'm like, I don't have a fucking choice. Around that time, two things happened that were monumental. The first is a young lady started working at the prison. So I was celled up by myself. I had this cell completely by myself. I had a stack of premium porn magazines that I was slanging like hotcakes at this prison, and I was spending all my money on weed. So I was just getting stoned and fucking my rolled up mattress every night, and it was and like I remember I was reading a lot during that period. I had solitude because I didn't have a cellie. I read a lot, fucked my mattress, smoked pot. It wasn't that bad of a lifestyle. I mean, I'm sure there's people that aren't even in prison that are living way worse lifestyles than that. It was all right. So this girl started working the unit. Now there's only, I don't remember. It was so long ago. I think 15, 16 inmates in this whole unit, which is, you know, pretty small for a prison unit. Just a really weird unit. One of the guys was that guy, Brian Mark, so I'd later find out was a child molester. But this girl started working there. And from what I was told, new COs generally start at this unit because there's such a low inmate count there. So it's easier for them to get acclimated and to start learning their responsibilities as a guard because they don't have to be in charge of, you know, 50, 60 inmates. It's like 15 or 16. So a lot of times when rookies come in, this is where they start. So this girl started working there. Let's call her Liz. Liz started working there, and she was probably, I was like 26 now. I'm 26. She was probably 28, a couple years older than me. She was rail thin, and she had kind of a goofy personality. I mean, not really good looking, but not really bad looking, just somewhere in the middle. And, you know, my perception of women, you know, when you've been locked up for this long, I've been locked up going on like 3 years now. So I don't, you know, people always talk about the proverbial beer goggles. You definitely get that when you're in prison. You know, like, you can look at a People magazine and look at like a hot chick and you get a boner. I don't remember having action like that since I was like 12. You know, like we get so overly stimulated with porn as we get older that, I mean, when's the last time that a fucking face shot gave you a boner? Seriously, think about that, because that's just to put things into perception here. So, or into perspective, sorry. So whatever, I thought she was like decent looking. And you start seeing guys in prison, you always see when there's like, it doesn't even matter if they're good looking or it just if they're a female, you'll start seeing how weird guys are around them. Like they get really weird. They'll like make an excuse just to lurk in their general vicinity. You know, you'll just see some guy and he's just like, you never see him outside of a cell, but now all of a sudden he's sitting in the common area reading a fucking book or something just because the girl's right there. And so you're seeing the guys with their lame little game trying to, I don't know, trying to just be around this girl. I didn't give her much attention because I had never subscribed to the idea that you could actually pull a female CO. It just seemed like such an abstract, outlandish idea. It's not even something that I entertained. You know, once in a while, like I'd be walking to my cell, I'd be coming in from like the weight pile or something, and I'd like look over at her and she'd look at me. That was about it. We never really had any interactions. So I had my little keychain that Sandman had gifted me. You know, I had this whole little porn empire now, and that came with this keychain with the covers of different porn magazines. Now, remember, I was selling black and white books, but sometimes there would be like a special clientele base, you know, somebody that wanted to spend $200 for a color magazine. I'm not going to pass that up. Whenever that happened, I would get out the keychain and I would give my whole little, you know, my little sales pitch. I'd give it to them and be like, okay, this one's this much, this one's this much. And there was this guy that wanted, I forget what it was, but it was something, it was like a lesbian thing, I think. And so I showed him the keychain and he picked this one out and he's like, I want that one. And I was like hustling him. I'm like, well, you know, that one's like an exclusive one that got brought in a couple years ago. I gave this whole like backstory about where this porn came from. It was all bullshit though. And I was like, it's going to be $250 and I need it put on my books. And he's like, all right, give me the information. I was like, all right. I didn't think this guy was going to come through. I go check my account like 2 hours after I see him and the money's on there. I'm like, fuck, he actually sent it. I was like happy, but at the same time, I had to actually go to CMS, this little like, you know, to the attic area where the porn collection was, and I had to get it out. I had to have someone stand point. It was always a hassle. And if you get caught going up into the attic of this prison, like, I heard you can get an escape charge. You're not supposed to be crawling up in crawl spaces like that in prison. That can get you in a lot of trouble. So it was like a risky thing to do. But this guy had prepaid me. So I just gave him my information thinking that he wasn't really going to do it. And he did it. So I had to go get it. And so he paid $250 for it. And I went to CMS, and I wasn't working CMS either. That was like, that's a specific job that you can get in prison, and that's not what my job was. I was on a labor crew where I had to like shovel snow, like if we were ever snowed in, which hardly ever happened, but that's what my job was. I always had jobs where I didn't really have to work. So I got it. I got the magazine, and I brought it back to my unit. And I was supposed to meet him the next day at the education department, and we were supposed to do the transaction. I was going to bring him the book, and that's it. You know, he had already prepaid me. Of course, I wanted to test drive it. I wasn't just going to not beat off to this premium lesbian porn anthology that I had like smuggled from some attic that could have gotten me 5 years in prison. I had to do it. I mean, it wasn't even something that I didn't consider. So that night, I decided to take a shower after I worked out, make a fifi, roll it in the old mattress, smoke a bowl, and get down. So I got everything set up, you know. At the time, I wasn't using the little wire thing. I was like smoking joints a lot, but at this point, I was making steamrollers out of a toilet paper roll. So I get a toilet paper roll and I'd get the little metallic part from the pencil and I take the eraser out, bite it with my teeth, and it would make like a little bowl that I could stick inside the cardboard. It was like a steamroller, and then I'd make a wick. I'd light the wick, and I'd hit the steamroller. So I had it all set up on my desk. Stupid! I shouldn't have done that. Like I had that set up, and I had the porn just chilling on my bunk. This rookie girl didn't shake the cell down that often. She was kind of like, that's the thing with COs. Some of them are like super like RoboCop, where they just want to go and like just tear everybody's cell apart. But then there's certain COs that are lazy or cool. Some of them are just cool. Some of them are just getting a paycheck and they don't want to go shake your cell down because they know that this is some small space that's the only thing that you have. It's like your only private space, and they understand that. When you get to the higher level yards, they leave you alone less. And this was still like a level 3 yard in the feds, so it was hit or miss. Some of them would fuck with you, some of them wouldn't. And I go take a shower. I'm all excited to go beat off to this Cadillac porn. And I come back, and my steamroller is still there. And there was no weed in it or anything, but I had like set it up and it was like chilling on my little desk. Porn magazine I'd put under my blanket. So it was on my mattress under a blanket. And I came back and it wasn't there. I was like, fuck. And this guy had already paid for it. So, you know, no other inmates would have gone in my cell. That's like a huge no. Like people get like killed over that in prison. And even though Oxford was a relatively kickback spot, it's still not the kind of thing that you can like nobody does that. You don't just go in somebody's cell like that. It's a big no-no in prison. So, you know, I had like a Native American neighbor and I was like, hey man, did you see anyone go in my cell? And he's like, yeah, the cop went in your cell. I'm like, for real? It's like, fuck. So I go up to the cop. It happens to be this like 28-year-old girl. And I go, hey, did you hit my cell? And she's like, uh-huh. I was like, did you take anything from my cell? She goes, uh-huh. And like, I'd been in prison for so long, but I'm like, damn, is this chick flirting with me? I couldn't tell anymore. I mean, like the last thing that even resembled a female was that time that I was on suicide watch and the tranny showed me her dick. That was like the last like encounter I had with even like a semi-woman. I kind of thought she was flirting with me though. And I was like, did you take my lesbian anthology? Straight up, just put it out there. I was like, did you take my lesbian anthology? She's like, uh-huh. I was like, well, can I have it back? And she's like, uh-uh. I was like, why are you talking like that? No, I didn't really say that. But so she basically told me, she's like, yeah, I took it and I'll give it back to you if you can guess what kind of pet I have. I was like, what? And she's like, I have an obscure pet at home. If you can guess what kind of pet I have, I'll give you your porn magazine back. I was like, a golfer? I don't know why that was the first thing I thought of, but she's like, nope. And so I'm starting to like rifle off, you know, obscure pets. I'm saying like really obscure. I'm like, is it a baby giraffe? Is it a rhinoceros? Like, what is it? Kitten, a putt? It's nothing like that. And she's like, nope, no. And she's really enjoying this. So this goes on for like, you know, 20 minutes. And I'm just kind of sitting at the desk. And all these like predators that have been like camped up, like reading their little books are like, ooh, like they're all mad that I'm talking to her and she's like giggling. Because I'm like turning it into this banter where I'm like kind of joking with her. And so it's about to be count time. And I don't guess it's about to be like the last count of the night where we have to go in our cells and actually like, you know, they lock the doors and everything. And I couldn't I couldn't guess it. So I'm like, you know, I was like, well, I couldn't guess it. Can I have it back? And she's like, well, I work tomorrow. I'm just like, okay, well, that magazine wasn't mine. And you're putting me in a bad position by not giving it to me. And she's like, I'll give it to you, but you have to guess my pet's name or what kind of pet I have. I'm like, oh my God. Try explaining this shit to the guy that put $250 on my books. You know, it's like the most ridiculous, made up sounding story ever. So I go to my cell, I lock up, you know, and next day I go and I meet this guy at education. I have to tell him, I'm like, look, female rookie took the magazine and I don't know if I can get it back or not. I can just give you the money. I was, oh man, there's a black dude. Oh man, that ain't the deal we made, dog. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? The cop took it. I'll give you your money back. What more can I fucking do? Oh man, that ain't right. That ain't good business, dog. I'm like, all right, great. So I go on with my day, and I know that she's going to be working again. You know, when I get back in, I'm going to work out, and I'm going to come back in. I'm going to see her. So again, I see her. Stupid shit goes on again. I'm telling her, I'm saying the most ridiculous. I'm like, do you have a eel in an aquarium or something? No. I'm just like, oh my God. And again, day 2. I can't guess what the pet is. So around this time, so this black dude that I owe the lesbian anthology to is like super upset about it. And I'm like offering to pay him, but he's like, no, I want that magazine. I'm like, oh. And then I'm dealing with her, and she's just like playing some weird game with me. Around this time, I meet a guy named King. His name's Little King. And Taco had introduced me to him. And, you know, like, I think, where was it? We were leaving the chow hall. So, like, you know, you get in a line, and then you, like, have to put your trays away when you're leaving the chow hall. And, you know, Taco had told me that he met some black guy that had heroin. I'd never seen heroin at this prison. You know, I'd seen weed, and I was just slowly starting to see any drugs for that matter. You know, like I said, before that, it was all hush-hush. So Taco had told me, like the day before, he's like, hey, I met this guy, and he has heroin, and he doesn't know how, you know, who to get rid of it to. And I told him that you liked it. So I want to introduce you to him. I was like, all right. So I'm putting my tray away, and I just see Taco's weird ass come up to me. He's like, hey. And the King's right next to him, and he's like, hey, this is the black guy with the heroin. I'm like, Jesus, Taco, he's right in front of us. Like a super rude thing to say. He's like, this is the black guy with the heroin. I'm like, oh my God, dude. Like, I'm just so embarrassed that I associate with this dude. I was like, hey, I'm Ryan. He's like, yo, I'm Baby King. I was like, hey, what's up? And he's like, hey, you want to go for a walk? I was like, all right. So we're walking and we're talking, and he's asking me if I fuck with heroin. I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, Taco told me. He told me that you do it. I was like, yeah. He's like, well, look, I'm hitting, and I need like a face for it. Like, he's like, I don't know people that do it, but I'm getting it right now. He was hitting on it. And I'd come to find out later, this guy was like, maybe like 5'3", right? I'm 5'6". This guy was shorter than me. He was a vice lord. And his name was Baby King. And he was so like small. He was like the same size as his girlfriend. Now back then, when you went to visit, you could wear your commissary bought shoes. So in the feds, it's not like in California State Prison, you can actually get like quarterly packages. You know, you can get like Walking Horse and whatever the other ones are called. But they have like these packages you can get, and you can order a bunch of different shoes. Feds isn't like that. They have maybe like 5 or 6 pairs that you can buy, and they like rotate them out a couple times a year. You know, sometimes they have like Air Force Ones, sometimes they have Cortezes, sometimes they have Adidas. Once in a while they'll have skater shoes, they'll have like Vans. I've seen Osiris before. It's like the same shit that you get in California State, but much smaller selection. And back in that time, you could wear whatever shoes that you had bought at commissary to your visit. Now they don't do that anymore. Now you have to wear your shower shoes to visit. And it looks ridiculous. You know, you used to be able to like look decent at a visit. And you're like you seeing your family for the first time and who knows how long, and you're wearing like little shower shoes. It looks ridiculous now. But then the reason they changed it was because people were doing stuff like what this guy was doing. His girlfriend was about the same size as him. So she would come in wearing Air Force Ones, and he was wearing Air Force Ones. Her Air Force Ones, they would like take the bottoms apart and stuff it to the brim with heroin. And then they would put the shoe back together. She would wear the shoe and they'd be in visit and they would just switch shoes. You know, they'd like be playing footsie and she'd take a shoe off and he'd take a shoe off, and they did it real slick. And he was getting like 10 or 15 grams of China White at a time. Not the kind of China White that's out now where it's like straight synthetic. It's like fentanyl. It's like, this is like back when it was real China White heroin. That's the stuff that he was getting. And he was getting like literally like 10 or 15 grams of it at a time, and he could not get rid of it. He didn't know who to go to, and somehow Taco had convinced him that like I was some junkie messiah or something and I could offload all this stuff for him. So I met him, went on that walk, and he's like, I'm going to shoot you a sample. Let me know if you can get rid of it. He gave me a full gram for free. Now, at Victorville, there was a lot of different rigs, right? Like every unit had at least one. You know, even though it's disgusting, everyone's sharing the same needle, the same binky, whatever. At Oxford, it wasn't like that at all. And I only knew this one guy that supposedly had one. And so after I got the gram, I snorted some first, and it was good heroin. And I was like, you know, now I really wanted to find a needle. So I go to this guy, let's just call him Skaggs. That's his real name. But I don't think he would care if I said it. Skaggs is cool. So I go to Skaggs, and he's at like Hobbycraft. He's always like, you know, you can go to Hobbycraft and you can like make little clay things and shit. And so he's like sitting there like painting one of his little clay creations. And I'm like, hey man, I got some dough. He's like, what? Really? I was like, yeah, do you still have a needle? He's like, yeah. He's like, I got to go back to my unit. Let me go grab it, and I'll meet you here on the next one. He was like all excited. I was like, all right. He's like, how much do you have? You have enough to give me an issue? I was like, yes, I do. I have a full gram. He's like, what? And I was like, dude, just chill out. I'll give you some. Just go get the rig. He's like, all right, cool. So he goes back to his unit. He comes back, and it's not assembled. Like, it's the pen, and he's got the little rubber thing at the back. And the needle's not attached to it. And I was like, what the fuck is this? He's like, well, I don't keep it together. I keep it in different places. But he's like, I have the needle here. But I had to go get the pen, and I had to get the rubber thing to make the binky. I was like, all right, cool. And so he comes back with this thing. It's like this big, and it's like a hollowed out piece of copper. It's like, it's hard to show, but I swear it's like, imagine a straw, the width of a straw. It's like a quarter of that. And it's just this hollowed out piece of like copper. I'm like, dude, that's not a fucking needle. He's like, I think it'll work though. I'm like, that's not gonna work. Dude, if you stick that anywhere by a vein, it's gonna blow your vein out. It's gonna put a hole like that big in you. He's like, no, I think that we can make it happen. And I'm like, and I'm like such a junkie. I'm just like, okay, whatever. So he's like sharpening it, right? He's like using some of his Hobbycraft shit to sharpen it. So he sharpens like one side of it. This thing is like, it's like this big, and I wish I could show you. It's like that's how much space is inside of it. It's just this hollowed out little thing of copper. He thought that would work as a needle. And so it actually does draw up the heroin into the binky. So you see the little plastic pen barrel filling up with this, you know, yellow. It's like almost clear. That's what China White looks like when you draw it up. It's like almost yellowish, very light tinted yellow. He draws it up, and he's like, all right, let me see your arm. So I show him my arm, and he's like, all right, he's like, dude, just don't look. I was like, all right. So I go like that. He's like, I'm going to hit you. Okay. Just bear with me, man. I'm like, all right. So I turn away, and he just stabs me right here. And I'm just like, fuck, dude. I'm like, there's no way that's going to work. He's like, just let me try one more time. And I'm like looking, and sure enough, there's a hole in my arm. I'm like, dude, Skaggs, there's no way there's no way that's gonna work. That's so thick. He's like, let me try one more time, please, bro. I'm like, all right. I put my arm out again. He stabs me again. And like, he's like holding me. I'm like thrashing my arm. He's like holding it. He's like, look, I think I see blood. I'm like, of course you see blood, dude. You just put a fucking other hole in me. He's like, just let's try it. And he starts squeezing the rubber down, and you just see it go into this hole. Like, he literally made a hole in my fucking arm. I'm sure he didn't hit a vein, but it like probably just muscled into me. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, within like 15 seconds, I feel it. And I'm just gouged out, right? And he's like, did it work? And I'm like, yeah. There's blood's dripping on the floor. It looked like there was a hole in my arm, and there's blood dripping all over the floor. He's like, dude, as long as it worked. I'm like, yeah, it worked. Like, seriously, I'm a junkie, bro, but I don't think I'm ever going to do that again. Like, I feel it, but I'm just going to snort it from now on. He's like, will you give me my issue? I'm like, yeah. And then I see him do the same shit. He's trying to hit his neck like that. I'm like, dude, that could probably kill you, bro. If you make a hole in your jugular like that. But anyway, he ended up getting high. He hit his leg with it. But as I'm leaving there, I see this little guy named Link. He's like he's from Boston, and he's another short guy. He's like 5'2". He's this little bald guy with these crooked jack-o'-lantern teeth. And he sees me, he's like, whoa. He's like, you look different. And I'm like, I'm super high. And he's like, hey. He's like, do you have heroin? I was like, what kind of question is that? Like, this is at a place where nobody talks like that. And so like I pull him aside. I'd been talking to this guy for a few months. And I told him that I did, and that I had a connection on it, but that I needed money on the books, because that's what this guy, Lil King, wanted. He wanted money on the books. So this guy, Link, is like, okay, all right, I'm going to make it happen. How much is it a gram? And at Victorville, the black tar was going for 400. At this place, the China White was going for 600, I think. 600. And of course, it's not a real gram. It's like a 0.4 or something, but people in prison are happy with what you're like. That's a decent amount for prison. So I'm getting this whole thing set up where now I'm basically the face for Lil King. And I'm like slowly but surely letting people know that I have it, that I can make it happen for money on the books. And Link buys a gram off me, or whatever amount it was. And now I'm getting strung out. So meanwhile, I go back to my unit because this black guy is really like starting to put pressure on me. Hey man, where my book at, man? That ain't good business, man. And he's like saying this in front of people, like at the chat, like I burned him intentionally. I'm like, dude, I have this rookie and she's trying to make me guess some obscure pet. How is that my fault? I told you I'd give you the money back. Oh man, I want my lesbian anthology, man. I'm like, duh. So finally I go back to my unit. This has been going on like a week or something. And I'm strung out too, by the way. Just going back there high every night. And I go up to her and I'm like, is it a possum? And she's like, it is a possum. I'm like, really? It was the first thing that I guessed that night too. She's like, it is a possum. Just talk like some like weird librarian or something. It is a possum. I'm like, all right, cool. Can I get my magazine back? Do you know what I've had to endure over this stupid lesbian anthology? Jesus Christ. She's like, I'll slide it to you after count. So when I locked down that night, they walk. It's always two COs that walk. They walk and they make sure that you're in there. So she's walking with this other guy, and they go by, and I'm kind of looking out my cell window, like wondering where my porn magazine is, if she's really going to give it to me. And maybe like 20 minutes later, they did their rounds, they did the count. About 20 minutes later, I just see the magazine slide under my door. And I remember looking at it, and I remember thinking, damn, if she was willing to do that, I bet I can get her. Like this little light bulb went off in my head. So it went from an abstract idea of me thinking that I couldn't pull a girl in prison to kind of getting obsessed with the idea that I could. And it's not just about like sexual stuff. It's about like, well, she can bring me tobacco. She can bring me drugs. That's what people seem to do when they pull a cop, so to speak. And I mean, that's where my mind had taken me. I mean, prison makes you so much more prejudiced, racist, homophobic, misogynistic. I don't think I'm any of those things, But when you're around, it's just like when you're around people using bad language all the time, you just pick up that language and you pick up those ideas. Like, instead of just, oh, here's a girl that I can like hook up with, it's like, oh, how can I objectify her and how can I like use her to my advantage? And that's exactly how I was thinking. And I don't think I definitely didn't think of women like that before prison. You know, that was like another noticeable change to me. So another few days go by, and like now I'm starting to kind of, you know, flirt with her a little bit. And she's flirting back with me, you know. I'll see her, and like the first thing I say to her, I'll be like, hey, you look really beautiful today. And she's like, oh, thank you. How's your possum doing? Oh, he's good. You know, it's just really kind of weird. I mean, she lives in Mill, Wisconsin. She's a weirdo. And so this goes on for about a week, and this guy, Link, is getting strung out now, and he's going to be a very important part of the next installment of these videos. But you know, our flirtation has definitely progressed. And it's going from like, we're kind of just like dancing around stuff to like being direct. And one night I'm sitting in my cell. So this is now, all in all, this is probably like 2 weeks after the porn magazine was taken for the first time. And I'm sitting in my cell, and she comes in. And this happens pretty frequently. If you're sitting in your cell and a CO comes in and says, hey, I need to shake the cell down, can you step out? That's like the only time you'll ever see like a CO go into someone's cell with them inside of it. So she came in, and she's like, hey, she's being all flirtatious, and she's like, hey, you think that I can shake your cell down? And I was like, yeah. I'm sitting there, I'm like not wearing a shirt, I'm like in my little, you know, mesh shorts or whatever. Like, can I get dressed? She's like, yeah. So I put my shirt on, and I stand up, and I spin around, and she's right there, and she's just kind of like waiting for me to leave. And I just go in and I kiss her, and she kisses me back. And it was brief. I mean, it was like 3 seconds, but she definitely didn't resist, and she definitely kissed me back. And it definitely evolved past that. And we'll get into that and what happened with Link and Lil King and Taco in the next installment in my 5 years in federal prison. It'll be video number 24. Thank you guys for the support. Palabra.